Good evening and welcome to this edition of Defacto Review, bringing you a weekly roundup of news and current affairs here in Mongolia with Joggle Defacto and myself, Grace Brown. We're live on Facebook at V Television. You can also join the conversation on Twitter, #Defacto. Coming up on the programme. President Batulga vetoes next year budget, saying it violates the IMF deal. The EU blacklists Mongolia in a crackdown on tax evasion. Almost 500 Mongolians are killed on the road in 2017, mostly by drunk drivers. And scientists uncover what looks like a mutant swan from a Mongolian fossil. We'll have all the details on that scary specimen later in the program.
Scary, yes.
Thank you for joining us. We begin with the latest on next year's budget, which is crucial for the continuation of the $5.5 billion IMF-led bailout of Mongolia. President Batulga this week vetoed the budget, however, saying that it violates the IMF deal. So, Joggle, what was his reasoning?
Well, mostly the reason is it's too much big deficit. He's asking they're spending too much. And he got another answer from, of course, different answer from the ruling party and the rulers, the government. They said, look, this budget is made by your party before. And they have been bringing the statistics like we had even 17% of budget deficit before. Now it's coming to 2017 to 10%, and this year, the next year is going to be 8%. 8% of GDP equivalent of it, but the deficit is still very big because OECD country requires only 2% of GDP budget deficit. So Mongolia, it's huge, and it was explained by the Minister of Finance, said that we cannot cut so dramatically that big deficit from, which was 2 years ago, 17% to now 8%.
Right,
and
saying it's got to be done in stages.
Exactly, and so why Mongolian budget keeps staying that with high deficit? That's the question.
The president said that the deficit has been steadily increasing. This despite Mongolia's economy picking up in the last year. We've seen growth of more than 5%, which is a huge rebound from last year's 1%. Why is there still such a deficit?
Well, because first of all, we had before 3 budgets, kind of. There was Development Bank, then Bank of Mongolia, then the state budget. All 3 were doing what is supposed to be done by the budget. So they got together into one budget, and they got that 17% deficit. Today, 10% is coming also because, around 8% is coming also because, according to the President office, saying that each parliament member has own budget of 3 billion tugriks to spend in their own district constituency, which exactly gives the impression that we still have 2 budgets. One is from the government, the other is from the parliament. And if each parliament member has this sort of big budget, who will control independently the way how they efficiently spend that money, which is we cannot control. So how about they spend this money? Well, one said that we need more schools in my district. Yes, of course. But how about they add that money to the budget of education, and they spend through that budget line, which they don't agree. So that's one of the reasons why the budget expenses are becoming higher and higher,
because
making the deficits
spending.
higher. Yes, and because this kind of each parliament has own big budget to spend for social projects.
Right. Parliament, of course, has the it has the power with a 2/3 majority to override any veto by the president. So what's the latest there?
Yep. Every time when the president vetoes some law, if the parliament, 2/3 of the parliament overrides or votes against, then the law goes as it is. So it was the case with the budget proposal. And the Minister of Finance also said that it turned out the whole government money was taken out from the state bank to commercial banks. And they were saving the state money with a high interest rate in order to gain interests. Kind of state is running or competing with the private sector to gain money. So they are siphoning the money to state coffin through the commercial banks. And the new finance minister said that he will stop that wrong practices. And another thing, why the budget expenses are very high, as you asked, is we still serve very expensive foreign debts raised through bonds.
Yes, that's right. And in January, Mongolia needs to make a $500 million Chinggis bond repayment. Does this budget accommodate that?
Yes, in a way, because it's not only $500 million of Chinggis bond, and also another $160 million of DIMSIM bond. So altogether, the government has to pay $660 million bonds in January, knowing that they have recently, a month ago.
Hangover from New Year, then.
Well, knowing that they have raised recently money instead of $660 million, they have raised $800 million, $140 million more.
This was from overseas roadshow.
Yeah, it is a Grege bond, the beautiful, another name, you know, somehow Mongols call their debt in a very beautiful way. So Grege bond was cheaper than the bond first time, because the bond we have to pay was 6.5%, but the bond is now, this Grege bond is 5.5%. But
so they gave investors the option to buy into this new bond.
They bought it already. And they have $800 million in the coffin now, in the account, and they are ready to pay in January that the bond they are supposed to pay completely, and they have the money. But the issue is, every time the government issuing new bond to pay old bond debt, they keep increasing somehow more, either 100 million or 200 millions, which is a lot sum, which is not a burden, even a bit cheaper for the budget. Nobody is thinking about to buying back some bonds with the cheaper money. They are more spending and spending. And we have a less and less transparency on what they are spending and how efficiently they are spending. For example, according to former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, currently he is in charge of, in the Budget Standing Committee, Mr. Jahulan, Parliament Member Jahulan, he said that about 480 or so million bond money has nobody to pay back. Can you imagine this sort of sum being stated in this way by a parliament member, which shows that again this government is really at all about having hold responsible for this big amount of money, of debt that we pay. Those who have not received, who have not got the money, we have not received a loan from the bond, but yet we pay through the increase of taxes.
Exactly. From January onwards, that tax level is going to increase between 10 and 25%, depending on.
Here, I would like to give an example of that increase. For example, if one is receiving salary, or one has a salary of 1.5 million Mongolian tugrix, which is about, at the current rate, $600, now they have to pay $125 from that $600 per month, which is quite huge, and the threshold is very slow.
Is not much.
Only from the $600, which is a year about $7,200, and it is regarded here as kind of higher bracket of income, and they are charging 25% of tax, which is immensely high. You know, in the U.S., if you have $7,200, you will need more state care, more social welfare, because you are very poor. And of course here they are taxing, yet a lot consumer goods for foods in particular, prices are in Mongolia at times higher than in the US. So what kind of policy
They are.
do
It's very expensive here. Fruit, vegetables, basics, everything apart from meat, perhaps.
And yet they are taxing like this. So people are really those professionals who finally deserve some salary which is higher than 600 US dollar. They are completely unhappy now.
Especially people who've been educated overseas, for example, young Mongolian professionals who've come back here who are contributing to this country's economy.
And I'm afraid it may trigger those young people to go back again or to leave the country. Because any professional who spend a lot of money for investing for their education, if they don't receive at least 600 US dollar per month, if they pay now 120 of them for state, and yet we don't know how much efficiently this government is spending our tax money. That's the whole concern in the society now.
I mean, people may be happy to pay slightly more tax if they can see what they're getting from that money. For example, in Australia, you pay up to 40% tax, but it's got state-of-the-art healthcare and fantastic schools. And, most families don't have to necessarily worry about healthcare and education. So it can work in some contexts when you have the social services at the same time.
Look at our traffic jam in the city, air pollution. You don't feel comfortable with that at all.
Well, speaking of tax, the European Union has listed 17 countries on a new tax blacklist, and Mongolia is one of them. It says that Mongolia, along with Trinidad and Tobago, Panama, South Korea, the United Arab Emirates, and other countries are uncooperative jurisdictions because they are not assisting in cracking down enough on tax evasion and tax avoidance. Jago, what does this categorization actually mean?
Well, they say that, as you said, not much cooperating with the European Union, disclosing the accounts, the tax systems, etc., which I find a little bit too much because Mongolia, because this 410 principles, which means income tax, and profit tax, and trade and social insurance all had 10% for everybody, which was a good chance for Mongolia to attract foreign direct investment. And probably they found this one is too low, and we kind of, especially attracting with lower interest tax interest rates, the other foreigners. Unfortunately, European Union cannot stop the healthy or unhealthy, whatever, competition among jurisdictions to attract more foreign investment through lower taxes. And this is normal competition among nations. So,
But Mongolia is raising the tax anyway. Most foreign investors
unfortunately,
will have to pay
why
25%
Mongolian state is to increase taxes when the taxpayers are not happy? Taxpayers don't see proper accountability, transparency in our tax spending, and the European government, European Union, instead of demanding the government to be more transparent, accountable to their own nations, they are now suggesting to increase taxes. I think it's a completely wrong approach. And plus, in Europe, there are several countries who has a lot lower taxes, and like Malta, Luxembourg, Ireland, Netherlands. Why they are not listed? So this is our concern. And plus, if we talk about a tax, we should consider the double taxations agreement. For example, with the Netherlands, Mongolia has double taxations avoidance agreement, or double taxations not taxing twice in two countries. That agreement, double tax agreement, they call it. Because that agreement, half of all Mongolia registered Mongolian foreign invest companies, half of them are registered in the Netherlands. The second half is in Hong Kong. And by the way, the government, Mongolian government,
This includes
last week,
correct?
last week, yes.
Yeah.
Last week, the Mongolian government included as offshore Singapore and Hong Kong.
And Switzerland.
In Switzerland, I don't think it is very wealthy for businesses in this poor country trying to survive from just mining all the best economies. So I don't know what will be the implication of all this blacklisting.
Well, apparently being blacklisted means that these countries have failed to meet international standards in their domestic regulations to prevent tax evasion and tax avoidance. Does this refer to foreign citizens and companies ostensibly using Mongolia to evade and avoid tax, or does it refer to a concern that Mongolian citizens and companies are evading and avoiding tax by moving money overseas?
Well, we need more clear evidence and explanation why they would do that in Mongolia, if they do it in Mongolia.
Yeah.
Why, if they follow Mongolian laws, they are to be kind of illegal in their own countries. So there are a lot of things to be understood by ordinary Mongolians in this regard. But again, there will not be end of the among jurisdictions of competition to attract more foreign direct investment through smaller taxes. And the smaller taxes is in kind of a good, because why we should increase taxes when the taxes expenses are not clearly reported? We are against that. The people are against of increasing taxes in this country because we are taxed enough, so much that we are tired of it, and we don't see the government is properly reporting on that. And in particular in such a mining-driven country like Mongolia, where the government's people are getting richer and richer and the ordinary Mongolians are becoming poorer and poorer. So more tax means less business for ordinary businesses, in particular small and medium enterprises. So I think the government and the European Union have to do a lot of work to explain to ordinary Mongolians who are struggling with their daily needs.
What are the consequences of being blacklisted? For example, less EU funding, potentially?
Well, probably that's what they say, and probably EU, some banks, they will decrease probably their portfolio in Mongolia, etc. But I don't think Mongolia is deserving immediately this sort of approach to, particularly because ordinary Mongolians, that's who is paying the taxes. So I don't think it is very fair to Mongolia, at least.
Finally, what has Mongolia's response to this been?
A Minister of Finance said that he will talk to European Union ambassadors here and make clear in where the improvements they are requiring to do. And probably the government has to do what they are required, because Mongolia is still dependent on the ODA, support from other developed countries.
Overseas direct investment.
Yeah, and also IMF requirements where they have pushed us to increase taxes, which is very unfortunate.
And there could be changes to the regulations from 2019. Is that what he said?
Yes, that's what the Minister of Finance says. But still the tax is very high in this society, and if increasing more taxes, that will be really unfair for small businesses in this country. Well, which is already true. We have talked about the salary income.
Yeah.
And which will already distract many Mongolians, in particular educated Mongolians, to stay in the country. So they will leave. So that's what we want, no?
Indeed. Well, now with the festive season upon us and more parties to attend, you might want to think twice about how you get around. The latest traffic data for Mongolia shows that 500 people almost were killed on Mongolia's roads in 2017, and drunk driving was the main cause. Jargal, what's the legal limit here for drinking? when going behind the wheel?
Well, that's not very clear. This shows certain percentage, and it depends on a lot of things. But they have increased last year the punishment for drunk driving in Mongolia. Now, according to the new law about traffic, it says that if intoxicated under the intoxication rate, intoxicated if you drive a car, then the penalty will start from 384,000 tugriks. Okay, it's about 200 or so US, or 100.5 US dollar, and then from 6 to 24 months, the abolishing your rights of license, and even maybe up to 30 days imprisonment, etc. They have increased that penalty. But
is it working though? I mean,
it's the right way.
It's quite alarming data, it seems.
Yeah. Well, every year about 500 to 600 people lose their life in this traffic or car-related accidents, unfortunately. And it is not only drivers, but also pedestrians, children, a lot.
Yes, actually, according to the data, half of all the people killed were pedestrians and cyclists. They weren't even in cars. We see this all the time in UB, right? You're trying to cross the road at a pedestrian crossing. It's a green man. It should be the pedestrian's right of way. There might even be traffic police on duty, but drivers seem to disregard these rules. And I mean, I myself have been nearly run over multiple times. I've seen other people.
So there is also a cultural issue, because we have a lot of internal immigration in the country. People just come to the city, buy immediately a cheap car, and they drive the cars like horses.
Right.
And we need to teach them, they need to learn, it's a cultural issue. And along with that, I would like to particularly highlight a problem with Japanese car. So the driver sits here.
Yeah.
Mongolia, like our two neighbors, China and Russia, we are a country of right-hand traffic rule, which means the driver is sitting the left side. And yet, half of the Mongolian cars today in the traffic are Japanese cars.
The second-hand Prius, yeah.
Yeah, most of them, mostly second-hand Prius. And this right-hand Japanese cars making slow the traffic movement because they cannot have the right lane with this one with more higher speed.
So it's difficult to see when overtaking.
Exactly, that's why they have all the way to overdrive and look at the road. And in that case, when the two cars are doing it at the same time in the middle of the road, they make an accident. I
actually saw a Prius flip and crash like a can on the roads to Dahan, just coming around a corner. It was pretty terrifying, but all 4 people inside walked out alive, luckily, because they were wearing seatbelts. But the driver was indeed drunk. How do we raise awareness to try and, as you say, improve education?
Education, culture,
the media, the government.
And since we cannot make traffic lights at every corner, every crossroad in Mongolia, it's a poor country, so there should be at least a rule, one by one. Just very simple rule, practice it in the US and UK, in many countries, and that's one thing, one solution. Let's have a rule one by one. And that at least will make easier or less these traffic accidents. And the other thing is, now a lot of infrastructure of the road is becoming for also Prius. In some places the pavement is in 2 sides, like for Mongolian car and Japanese type of cars. I mean Mongolian rule cars. And that means a lot of people are now lobbying to have the Japanese traffic rule in Mongolia. Then it will be disaster when we have 2 neighbors with the different rules. And then how can we be the economic corridor or a transportation corridor between 2 countries if we have another rule of movement? So this is a lot of things to think, and I think government will be much better in position if they will say, announced now, from certain years from now, they will forbid or will not allow the Japanese wheel-driven cars to their country. If they will want, maybe they can pay 5 times more taxes in this way. Now
Priuses are very cheap. We were covering this story just a couple of weeks ago. They're very cheap, aren't they? Because they're hybrids.
Very old cars.
Yeah.
And plus the batteries. The big problem with Prius is batteries. I don't know what we will do with this hundreds of thousands of Prius batteries when it is not working anymore. We don't have the facility to store or destroy or recharge this battery. So it's another big ecological problem is coming to the country along with this terrible air pollutions.
Well, finally, some positive news. Scientists have discovered a new dinosaur from a Mongolian fossil, and it looks like the stuff of nightmares. It's called the Halscaraptor, with a crocodile teeth and claws on its wings. It's a so-called murder swan, and the amphibious predator is thought to have lived 75 million years ago here on land and in water. But as is so often the case with these amazing Jurassic discoveries, Jargal, these fossils were smuggled out of Mongolia. It's home to so many dinosaur bones. How is it that smuggling is so prevalent here?
That's the whole problem, and that's I want to particularly highlight with this discovery of this new creature.
The mutant swan.
Yeah, this is a very strange creature. I think our custom system is even more stranger because, you know, this creature was flying 75 million years ago. But they could not fly now when they are fossil, you see. Yet they are abroad. They have somehow crossed the border. They did not fly, it's for sure. Yeah. So the question is, that's what I'm asking from customs head, that how there's so many dinosaurs are crossing our borders secretly. Who is responsible for that? Yep. Okay. No, really, actually, we have a lot of problems with border. Many things are smuggled. A couple of years ago, there was even they found a body in some cargo, and the Chinese customs said, "There is a body, take it." That person body, huh? And we have Chinese customers announced that, I remember, but nobody from Mongolian customers had explained how it happened that the whole body is going through the border, and Mongolians have not seen it. Chinese look at it and they say that is not possible.
Gosh.
So, and the same, some strange situation with, you remember the border now with China, where the truck drivers are struggling to go through, and the short Tsagang had a place from where they were transporting coal easy. The Chinese closed it and they said, "You are smuggling through this, on this traffic, smuggling things that we don't allow to go through the border." And Mongolian customers did not explain us what do the Chinese mean for that. So that was one of the reasons. So still with this dinosaur, the question is, are we safe? Do we control our border? So why they would smuggle so many dinosaurs? And it is not a small thing, you know, it's just small ape.
It's the size of
a huge
swan. Yes.
Whole bones. Somehow, obviously, they're not went as a whole there, but they break down into boxes somehow. They cross the border.
Well, the good news is that the scientists will return it to Mongolia once they've finished studying it. And that brings this edition of Defacto Review to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. From Jargal and myself, Sakina Mrare.
Thank you very much for watching us.
Have a good week.
Thank you.